Hey, friends. With all the Andrew and Sarah news coming out now, just drip by drip on all their scandals, how bad they really are, blah, 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 I thought it would be interesting to go back to one of the very first exposes. This book, I've had this for quite a while. It was banned in Britain because the author, Wendy Berry, was Charles and Diana's housekeeper from 1985 until their divorce in 92. And she was upset because she was promised a job after their divorce. And then, whenever she didn't get it, she was having to leave, pack up, find a new home, all of that sort of thing. She got pissed off, friends, and decided to break her NDA and publish this book. Like I said, it was banned in Britain, it was published in the United States and a few other countries, and it's currently out of print. I've had this copy for quite a while. Like I've told y'all before, I have been fascinated by the royal family for decades. So almost all of the exposés, biographies, autobiographies, everything out there, I've read. And a few other bigger YouTubers have covered this book. Like I believe the Vintage Read Show went over it last year. I think Cheer Denise might have went over it too. But I want to go over it again anyway, specifically today, the Andrew and Sarah parts, and give my thoughts and commentary and see what y'all think, friends. Page 35 is where she starts her Sarah and Andrew story. The chapter starts on page 34. The first page and a half is pretty much about Charles and Diana. I'm just going to start straight in with the Andrew and Fergie stuff. It says, the sound of laughter filled the hall as the throaty upper crust voice of a Sloaney female shouted out, Cooey, is anybody there? It was Saturday afternoon on June 25th, and Sarah Ferguson had just arrived. Well, where is he? Bellowed Fergie. Who? Smirked Diana. Charles or Andrew? Not Andrew, silly, replied Sarah. Charlie boy, your hubby. Oh, he's not here. You must have known that, Sarah. I told you that last weekend. It's just you, me, Andrew, and the boys. I don't even have Barbara this weekend. Well, where's the drinks cabinet then? Joked Sarah, and both dissolved into a fit of giggles that any pair of 14-year-old schoolgirls would be proud of. Since there was no nanny on, I said I would assist Evelyn with her work, as she might be called on by Diana to help out with William and Harry. I walked up to greet Sarah Ferguson in the hall, taking her slightly tatty, battered old suitcase up to the green room where she would be staying. I unzipped the case and laid Fergie's clothes out on the bed, a pair of old jeans, a thick tweed skirt, and several nondescript blouses. It had all been packed in a hurry and was crumpled, and some of it didn't look particularly clean either. Fortunately, Ev arrived at this point, and I left her to sort out the clothes that needed pressing. Just look at this stuff, will you? She tutted as she went through the piles of gray white underwear. God help us all. On the way back downstairs, I could hear Prince Andrew had just arrived. Dressed in heavy corduroy trousers, a checked shirt, and a dark yellow sweater, he greeted Diana extremely affectionately with a kiss on either cheek. He then made a bellowing noise and gave Sarah a bear hug, kissing her full on the lips. I can see who is the more popular in here, laughed Diana. William and Harry loved seeing their uncle, and Andrew knew this. It allowed him, quite shamelessly, to play the buffoon in front of them, entertaining both excited children with numerous practical jokes. He had them in fits by firing a water pistol at Sarah and Diana as they walked around the back garden. Later on, as Diana was preparing to take them up to bed, he kept them entertained with strange farting noises, pulling grotesque expressions that William in particular thought hilarious. It's probably one of the most innocent things Andrew's ever done. Is run around farting with his nephews. While Sarah was a simple, relatively uncomplicated girl at this time, I had heard horror stories about Andrew from my son and other staff at Buckingham Palace. As a royal child, he had been brought up like Charles to be waited on hand and foot, and as a result, tended to barge his way around the house, expecting to be looked after and served for every whim. It was explained to me that it wasn't his fault. That line there, it was explained to me that it wasn't his fault, simply that he had been reared in a system that allowed him practically anything he wanted. I can't help but wonder why. You know, friends, I really like the queen and I never like to criticize her. I always give her credit for the fact that she completely destructed an empire that she was born to make it a voluntary Commonwealth of Nations. But the queen doesn't appear to have had that kind of over entitled nature and rudeness to people and wastefulness demanding kind of character. So I can't help but wonder what changed. Why were her sons raised to have that? I don't get it, friends. What do y'all think? Please tell me in the comments because I really want to not think badly of the queen, but I don't understand this, honestly. Okay, continuing on. There was a childishness to his character that sat somewhat uneasily with the physique of a sturdy 26-year-old man. Yeah, I bet. We have to remember a word he loves to use. He said it to Sarah in reference to a money deal. Well, if they want to play, let's play. And he said it to Epstein in an email. We'll play again soon. It sounds creepy. It just sounds creepy, friends. I'm not creeped out that he ran around farting with his nephews. That's fine. Met pretty much everything else about Andrew I'm creeped out about. James told me Prince Andrew was like his father, the Duke of Edinburgh, and unmistakably the Queen's favorite son. There was an inherited bluffness and directness which could be off putting until you realized it was usually just a front for getting through otherwise awkward situations. Unlike Edward, Andrew was the archetypical man's man, whose sense of humor perfectly matched the Windsor's delight in crude, coarse, lavatorial jokes. Whoopee cushions were constantly hidden under guest chairs. Jokes about farts, the stock and trade of his conversational banner. Well, that seems right in line with his 72 teddy bears that apparently have to be arranged in some sort of military formation style on his bed by the maids every day. Otherwise, he'll have a tantrum. James added that, unlike Edward, who was unusually shy and private about getting dressed and undressed in front of staff, Andrew took delight in strutting around his apartment with nothing on, barking instructions as staff hurriedly picked up wet towels and dirty clothes strewn around the bed. One occasion James remembers vividly was when he went with Andrew and his detective for a weekend shooting on the Duke of Westminster's estate. The prince had just gone off for a bath when the bell rang. Come in, shouted Andrew as James knocks on the door. Where the bloody hell are my black socks? The ones with the stripe at the top. He was standing in the middle of the room, stark naked, vigorously rubbing his wet hair with a towel. Another two tossed into a corner by the dressing table. James looked down, then up. The talk about Andrew's legendary libido and stamina had undoubtedly been exaggerated. Ooh, Wendy liked to get petty. She a messy petty girl. I like it. Staff were practically invisible as far as he was concerned, since they were there to serve and not to question his actions. As a result, he was not the most popular man to work for at Buckingham Palace. In particularly, it was his thoughtlessness that upset most of the housemaids and valets who worked under him. Apparently, his bedtime habits as a single man left a lot to be desired, and a collection of scrunched up soiled tissues usually lay scattered around the bed each morning for staff to collect after they had made his bed. Couldn't throw away his own trash. There was a good example of his offhand manner that evening as Diana and Sarah were reading the boys their bedtime story. A telephone call intended for the pantry was somehow misdirected to the drawing room where Andrew was flicking through some magazines. Frances Simpson, the Kensington Palace housekeeper, was on the line and didn't recognize his voice. When she asked for me, Andrew apparently replied, "Wrong bloody room, idiot," before hanging up. Andrew was the antithesis of Edward, who, whenever he came to Highgrove, either alone or with a girlfriend, was utterly charming and polite. Where Andrew would barge in front of you through a doorway, Edward would stop, step to one side, and let you through, whoever you were. That evening, when William and Harry safely tucked up in bed in the nursery, Andrew, Diana, and Sarah had dinner on card tables in the sitting room. As we all traced up to the staff room after supper, we could hear the sound of laughter. It was the first time we had heard real happiness in that room for a long time. Edward, like I've told y'all before, he was a theater kid. He left the military to do theater and television production type stuff. And even though he has always been considered a much more gentle and polite one of the Windsors, he doesn't have a perfect reputation either. He got really, really irritated at a group of British press reporters that he called together for his It's a Royal Knockout debacle, and then he kept them in like a press pen with no food or water. It was a miserable weather day. They didn't even get to see most of the actual It's a Royal Knockout action. And then Edward would kind of pop in every now and then and ask them if they're having a good time and chastise them, like lectured them. Well, show some bloody enthusiasm kind of thing. So yeah, Edward, he is much more gentle from what we read to the other Windsors, but he doesn't have a perfect reputation among the people either. Oh, steady Eddie at the ready. Maybe that's what they need now. The royal family keeps saying that Andrew is distracting from all the good work they're trying to do. They can't get the Andrew story out of the news. Maybe Steady Eddie at the Ready needs to stage another It's a Royal Knockout. Meghan and Harry might come back out of their exile just to battle. Okay, back to our book. The following morning suggested that the night before had been particularly riotous in the guest bedrooms. By all evidence, Andrew and Sarah had decided to try out both rooms in the space of a few hours. As I replaced the voluminous linen sheets on the king size beds, I felt quite entitled to a little moan. Having Sarah and Andrew to stay was going to mean a lot of work. Several staff at Buckingham Palace had warned me that I would be changing both beds every day for the length of their visit. At Highgrove, without her husband, Diana seemed to flourish as never before. She suddenly took much more interest in the gardens and grounds, accompanying the boys and Andrew and Sarah outside in the cold, where normally she would have chosen to stay indoors. William was by now able to sit comfortably on his pony, Smoky, with the help of the groom, Marion Cox, and he loved being able to show off his riding skills to the grown-ups. Diana had decked the boys out in trendy jeans and sweaters, and the whole group had races in the garden until lunch, which they ate in the dining room. This was a treat for the boys as well, since normally they had their food upstairs with Nanny in the nursery. That afternoon, it rained, and children and adults mingled freely around the house. Everyone was in and out of each other's rooms, like some large extended family. Seeing Diana at Highgrove with people of her own generation, it suddenly struck me that it could be the happy family home that Charles intended when he first moved in. The trouble was that it only seemed relaxed when either he or Diana weren't there. Put them together, the problems resurfaced all over again. The Monday morning before they left, Sarah popped her head around the kitchen door and asked for some more writing paper for her room. I was struck by how pleasant but ordinary she was in the flesh, without any proper makeup on. Dressed in a long skirt and jumper, with her hair tied into a ponytail, she looked more like a prep school matron than a duchess in waiting. I've just got to send some letters, though, on Highgrove paper, she giggled. I promised a friend who will be so terribly impressed. If only Sarah Ferguson had stayed like that, an excitable, unpretentious, upper class girl. Marriage brought her attention in a list of privileges that she could never have dreamed of. It was quite to turn her head. That Monday, Diana was picked up by the Red Royal helicopter at 2:30 p.m. As she walked up the steps, she turned and waved to the staff who stood in the hallway to see her off. She looked happy and content, in control of her own life and at ease with Charles safely out of the picture. I didn't find any other mentions of Andrew and Fergie in Wendy's book other than just incidentally here and there. Like at one point, she says that large gatherings don't come as naturally to Diana as they do to Fergie, that sort of thing. But I found her description of Andrew and how the entire royal family saw and treated him back then very, very interesting because there are articles coming out right now that appear to be leaked from Charles's people saying, well, the king and the palace wanted to put out statements showing their sympathy with the victims of Epstein before, but Andrew wouldn't let him. He kept vetoing it. And it's like, what the actual hell are they thinking saying that? Because clearly, if King Charles has the ability to remove Andrew's prince by birthright title in addition to his dukedom, his cast iron lease, and all that stuff, he could have overrode Andrew and put out whatever the fuck statement he wanted. Do y'all see that too? Am I right or am I reaching here, friends? Let me know in the comments and have a good day.